Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Matthias and I'm a real estate agent here in Toronto. With the snow coming our way, if you're a landlord or if you're a tenant, you might be wondering who's responsible to shovel that snow in the driveway. In a recent workshop that I attended that talked about the Residential Tenancy Act, it lays out some of the things that the landlords are responsible for and some of the things that the tenants are responsible for. So in this case, who's actually responsible for shoveling the snow? Common sense would dictate that it is usually the landlord who's responsible to clear out the driveway, and you are correct, but that is not always the case. I'm going to use a case that happened here in Ontario between a landlord and a tenant that was brought in the judicial court. Let me give you a bit of a background to the story. In the original lease, the tenant had agreed to shovel the snow of the driveway, but that winter, the tenant did not shovel the snow. And as a result, as the tenant was walking up the stair, it suffered a personal injury and they had to go to the hospital. Now, the tenant then proceeded to sue the landlord due to negligence. However, the landlord pleaded not guilty, citing that the tenant had originally agreed in good faith that they would clear the snow of the driveway. Now, the judge, upon reading the Residential Tenancy Act, said that although the responsibility falls under the landlord to clear the driveway of snow, it does not say that the landlord cannot contract the job out to a third party. And that third party can be anybody. In this case, it happened to be the tenant. And because the tenant had agreed in the lease agreement that they would shovel the snow, the ultimate responsibility still falls on the tenant. And because of that, the tenant did not win the case. The tenant was not happy with the final judge, and so they appealed to the Court of Ontario. Now, once they appealed to the Court of Ontario, the judge there started to dissect the Residential Tenancy Act further. And the judge said the following. Number one, the judge agrees that the landlord himself does not have to clear the driveway and that he can contract the job out to a third party. So this has not changed. This third party can still be anybody, including the tenant himself. However, number two, the Residential Tenancy Act places the responsibility on the landlord, and anything that shifts that responsibility would go against the original act, and it would be void and deemed nullified. And C, if the job is not contracted out on a separate agreement, it would go against the Residential Tenancy Act, and the contract would be void and deemed nullified. So if you want the contract to work, it needs to be written in a separate contract other than the original lease. So finally, in the Court of Appeal for Ontario, the judge actually agreed with the tenant, and it ruled in favor of the tenant, and the landlord had to pay for personal injury money to the tenant. So some advice here. If you're the landlord and you're not thinking of doing the job yourself of removing snow, that is totally okay. You can contract it out. But number one, make sure that you write a contract that is separate from the original lease that specifically states what are the responsibility of that third party. That third party can be any company, and it can also be the tenant themselves. But the job has to be specific. What do they have to do? When do they have to do it? All of those things have to be outlined specifically. Number two, it needs to have consideration. That means that if you're hiring a company, obviously you have to pay them. So the same thing applies if you're contracting the job to the tenant themselves. So it could be money that you pay to them, or it can be a reduction in the rental as well. So the advice that I gave you above is a very general advice. If you want more specific advice and you want something to be written down, such as a contract, you might consider to talk to a lawyer before you do that yourself, or talk to your real estate agent. If you want to talk to the lawyer, I have a link below with a lawyer that I work with often. He's very experienced in these matters, and I think he can help you out there. So thank you very much for watching, and that is all. If you liked this kind of video and it helped you out, make sure you give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification button. It really helps my channel to grow. Alright, that's it for today. With that, I'll see you next time.